Hello, Sam Ken. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, mate?
That's it, mate. I'm getting by. How's lockdown treating you?
Yeah, lockdown doing all right. Just staying in, working from home. Luckily, one of the people who's still earning.
How are you finding the whole working from home process?
It's been a bit tricky. Motivation's probably the main problem. Most of my work is online, just running codes and stuff. So for the most part, it's just trying to keep myself above water and actually not clock off early each day, which is a massive struggle.
Yeah, I know many people that are in the same kind of position. It is hard to stay
Mm.
motivated. Good. All right. Well, I'm excited to have this discussion today. It's
Yeah,
definitely
same.
that I know very, very little about. I know I know some of the myths that surrounds kind of like nuclear power and stuff.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of like the actual, what the industry is and what the industry does and the challenges and stuff like that,
Yeah.
um, I know very little. So this is going to be like really educational for me.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully, I can help.
Cool. So let's start then. I like to start before university. That's kind of the start point I like to go from. Um,
Okay.
what influenced your decision to choose your university and the course that you're going to study?
God, what a question. I think. Well, I was always basically really good at maths and physics. Those were like my two main areas when I was at school, and I jumped into A-level maths and physics because I knew immediately I was going to go into the sciences somewhere. I always knew that ever since I was a kid. That was my main area, and I really excelled at maths, but I just didn't really find it as interesting at physics. So I think when I was about, I don't know, first year of A-level physics, that's when, yeah, I'm just going to go to university and do A-level physics. There wasn't like a sort of a like a flashlight moment when I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I just kind of went into it gradually, I reckon.
Yeah.
Fun fact, I actually got like mostly A's in my A-level math, but I came out of A-level physics with C. It's an actual miracle that I went to university to do physics at all. Leicester was just very glad to have me, apparently.
Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
wow, that's interesting. So you knew obviously you got your A in maths.
yeah.
Um, you knew that physics was where your kind of passion was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because maths is all good and everything, but it's all just it's theoretical stuff. It's all just doing the numbers. I'm very much both. I like to do the nitty gritty number work, and I like to hop into a lab and build something and actually get my hands dirty. That's kind of why physics is a huge fusion of both of that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's very interesting because obviously I know you through university and stuff, and you're a very creative guy as well.
Oh,
And
thank you. I appreciate that.
no, you're an incredibly creative guy. I've seen some of your writing. I've seen you perform. So it must be quite a blessing to have that kind of scientific mind, but to also be very creative. Because I must admit, I don't know many people that are like that in those fields.
Yeah, well, this is actually something funny because there's like a ton of like famous like rock stars and actors that have like PhDs and stuff.
Oh,
So it seems that is actually like a really common thing, at least for like the actually properly successful people. I'd never attribute myself to that own category, God knows. But they're like there's some like famous rock bands where like every member's got a PhD in a scientific field. It's crazy. But yeah, like no, but it definitely helps because it's funny actually. I think the main difference is with people like, well, me for example, I guess, is it's a social skill thing as well. People who are like creative and more outgoing, they bridge that gap between like hardcore scientists who are really good at the data stuff and people who don't understand it but are really chatty.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Because I remember ages ago I went for like a interview to be a math teacher, and towards the end of the interview they said like, no, yeah, we'd be interested in getting you on our books for like temporary positions because like not many maths people are as sociable as you are, so you'd be really good with the kids. And that's the first time I really heard of this, and I was like, yeah, that's a good point. There's not many people in that
Yeah.
category, but yeah, to be put in there is quite a compliment. Thank you.
No, no problem. So it has really helped you out then. It's really helped you out having that sort of creative mindset as well as obviously being good at the science and the maths and
Oh
how,
yeah, oh yeah, massively. Like there's always that moment where you're solving a hard problem and you think to yourself, well, I could brute force this with the science I know, or I could be a bit tricky, not tell anyone until it works. And there's always that attitude.
yeah, of course. Okay then. So obviously you went to the University of Leicester,
Yeah.
and obviously you did the physics course.
Mm.
After that, did you go straight away on to doing the masters?
So yeah, this was there was an interesting story in that period. So when I finished my degree at Leicester, it was a 4-year integrated masters, but I only came out of it with 2-2 in pure physics. And there were two problems there. And for anyone who is listening, this is like a major thing in the scientific industry. First off, make sure you get at least a 2-1, because like grad schemes and jobs will not take you, won't even consider you for the most part. And secondly, specialize the hell out of your science. If you find a field that you are interested in, just go for it, because if you are an expert in one specific thing, you are going to get way more job opportunities than being a jack of all trades. So yeah, that's exactly how it works in science. You need to be an expert in one specific thing, and someone will hand you a paycheck to make it work.
That is so interesting. That is so interesting, because I know, especially with, obviously I studied English, and it's kind of like those sort of more artsy subjects. It's kind of like the opposite in some ways. You know, they want you to try and be on top of most things. But that's really interesting to hear, though, that you know you do need to kind of specialize.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can't hurt to be, you know, have a wide knowledge base, but when you're being like, when someone's asking you for a job, if you can't say, oh yeah, I'm trained specifically in that and I have a knowledge and experience of that, like they're just going to say, well, we're going to go find someone who is. That's part of the problem. But yeah, so I came out of Leicester with a 2-2, or Desmond, as my dad likes to call it, and so. I tried knocking around grad schemes for a while, so I had to do like sort of, you know, lower paid jobs like waitering, sweeping floors and stuff. And eventually, I just thought to myself, do you know what? Nah, this ain't doing it for me. Clearly, I need more. So that's when I remembered that like I could go back to university. It was just going to cost me a bit more.
Yeah.
So I had to. And because I'd already done a master's, there was no more student finance available to me. So instead, I took out a bank loan to pay for the course and go back to university for a 1-year master's course in Birmingham. And luckily, it paid off. It was quite risky, I'm not going to lie. If anyone listening, it's a risky thing to do, take out a bank loan. Because after that 1 year, you have to start paying it back with interest. You get 1 year. So I was really lucky in that. I think it was the last of the scheme. It was like a co-op thing. And it was like a scheme where you could have like a big amount of money put to you just for the education. And yeah, I was really lucky because it was the last year it was being given out to people.
Wow, that's really like some. Wow, I don't know anyone that, or you know, that is such a huge risk. You must have been quite not scared. Scared's not the right word at all, but there must have been quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah, see, this is the interesting thing. I was more nervous about actually getting on the course because I had a lot of sort of preconceptions about my degree, because when you're being rejected job after job after job, you start to think the 2-2 is basically worthless. Like the 2-2 is like a bit of stone, and a 2-1 is like this gold standard that everyone has to attain to. And I was absolutely terrified. But this, first off, like I said, once you specialise, the job opportunities just open right up. You just got to keep searching for them. And secondly, the course I went on is called Physics and Technology of a Nuclear Reactor in Birmingham. And it's a 1-year course, and it's made specifically for industry, and it's funded by the industry. So basically, it's like a cycle where the industry pumps money into the course, and they keep churning out new people to go into the field.
Yeah.
And I think I know it's one of the best nuclear courses in the UK. I think Manchester does another one. But I think it might also be like a contender for one of the best nuclear courses like in Europe.
Wow.
I'm not sure about that. But the thing is, yeah, so, and I turned up, and there was like a small interview, and it's actually funny because I'd been out of university for what, 2 years, I think? Yeah, at least 2 years by the time I went back. So like my physics knowledge was not up to stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember before I went to the interview, I downloaded like a 400-page manual that's given to nuclear workers in the US. That's basically a whole background of like radiation, reactor theory, kinetics, everything like that. And I remember swatting this entire damn thing in like 4 days. I didn't take. I'm not going to say I memorized most of it because I didn't. But it gave me literally enough knowledge to get through the interview.
Yeah, that's really good though. Like that's the credit to you. That's a really good initiative.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. Like, because the course was so specialised, I knew that if I got on the course and I finished it, I would have a job. Like, maybe not straight away, but I would get one. So I was just nervous about getting on the course. And then when I finally got on it, I was like, right, this is it. I just got to clear my masters and get a job. This is fine. The only thing I was worried about is like getting a job in time to start paying the loan back, which again I was very fortunate.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So in terms of choosing to specialize it in nuclear itself, when did you kind of make that decision?
So
And
this was actually, yeah, this is a good one actually, because for most of my time in Leicester when I was doing physics, I was like, yeah, I love physics, but nothing ever really grabbed me until I did my final year project. Because in the physics masters in Leicester, you do two final projects rather than like a single dissertation, and one of them was like a sort of like a more academic one where you have to go over a load of scientific papers and like sort of collate the data into your own study. And I decided to look up weather effects of a nuclear fallout. And at first I thought, oh, nuclear bombs, that sounds cool. But the more I looked into it, like a lot of it was like geological and climate data, but I really sort of got interested in like the nuclear bombs and the radiation side and everything.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, I referenced that project for years because it was something that's genuinely interested me, and that was the first time I'd done it. Like I'd actually tell people about it outside of university. So I was like, yeah, this is it. This is the field that I'm really interested in. Like from that study, so like there were the people they did studies with like simulations of a nuclear war. Global warming at the time of those papers had only put the world's temperature up by like 1.2 degrees. A nuclear war would drop the temperature globally by 10.
Really?
There'd be no crops for about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a really small like a small scale war between India and Pakistan, like the whole world cropless for years.
Wow, that's it's strange, isn't it? Because in some ways that's so fascinating, but in other ways that's pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the thing. Like, I remember reading it, and I thought at the time, like, oh, we'd be nowhere near the nukes, we'd be fine. And then when it's like, no, you don't understand. There would be huge clouds of like black gas taken up by the nuclear fires into the atmosphere, and it's so high they just disperse and kind of like make this black sphere around the planet, blocking out like 70% of the sunlight.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how crazy nuclear war is. It's like if it ever actually happens, it don't matter if you're not even near a nuke, you won't be eating for a long time.
Yeah.
And I tell that to everyone when they're like, "Oh, we'll be fine. Nukes won't affect us as long as they don't hit us." It's like, no, sit down.
The story.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So that's what really got me into it, like looking up the nuclear bombs and stuff. And then again, like a few years after I came out of university, I was like, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to specialize in nuke. I'm going to get myself a job in the industry.
What did on a more personal note, what did your family kind of think, or and your friends think about you making this decision to take the loan out and go back to university?
Well, they'd noticed me struggling for a while, especially my family, because I basically I lived in Leicester for a year, and then I had to go back and move in with my family, and I think I stayed with them for just over a year before I moved back out to Birmingham. And I was mostly working part-time jobs, and I've managed to get a full-time job for a couple of months before I decided to go back. But do you know what? One of the main catalysts actually for me deciding to go back was because I was feeling unsatisfied in my job. Right, I was, you know, it was a nice job, nice people, but I basically went to work for 8 hours a day. I'll either swept the floors or clean the machinery. That was pretty much what I was doing at the time. And I thought to myself, oh, I know who'll take me, the army. The army will, you know, take anyone as long as they're, you know, fit to serve. So I thought I'll go in and be an engineer. At least I'll be doing something scientific. And I remember going through the process partially of that, and then unfortunately, just after I think it was like my 23rd birthday, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So at that point, I kind of had to think to myself, and I went, right. And they basically said, yeah, your mum's got a year left to live. And I'm like, right, there's no way I'm going to fucking spend like the little time my mum has left on some training exercise on a hill in Scotland. That's just not fucking happening. Yeah. So I quit that, and I was like, right, fuck it, I'll make my mum proud. And I just took the risk, and I went. And before she passed, I think it was literally only a week before she passed or something, I did the interview and got accepted in.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that to me was that was the moment where I was like, right, fuck it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly.
Yeah, yeah. Good on you, mate. Honestly, good on
you.
No.
You. So yeah, that was the sort of the moment. So family was super supportive of it. They were all really proud of me. A lot of people didn't realise that I'd actually taken out like a bank loan aside from my family. Like it was only like a fair few people only found out after I like got the master's certificate in my hand and I'd already had the job. And they're like, hang on a minute, you did this degree out of your own pocket? You fucking mad? I'm like, yeah, apparently so.
But like you said though, it's paid off. It's paid off. Something I've found when I've been doing these conversations with different people in different industries is that it seems to me like everyone's taken a risk or some sort of risk. This seems to be like a massive reoccurring theme with everyone I talk to, and it's really interesting. It's really nice to also hear that risk paid off for you. It's really
Like I think it's very much it was a calculated risk. Like I said, like the course was pretty much it. If you get in, like it's guaranteed that if you come out of it like with the masters. See, this is the thing about master's degrees that not many people say is when you get like a BSc, it's like industry, like the companies and stuff. They'll very much look at your grade and what sort of experience you did with it, because a BSc is sort of like the canvas that you put the paint on.
yeah.
Whereas with masters, that's when most people tend to specialize and really smash into like a proper area of expertise. At which point, they're not so much worried about the grade as to did you pass and does it fit what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Because again, the master's degree I went on, like custom tailor made for the nuclear industry. Like I learned the only thing they couldn't put in there was like stuff about submarines, which is like defense classified.
Yeah.
So, but you learn that eventually as well, just through bits and bobs. So yeah, like it wasn't a case of do I need to get a good grade in this? It was a case of can I actually pass it?
Yeah.
And luckily, but the interesting thing again is I got accepted for the job before I even like officially did my final project.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in the master's course I was on, your final dissertation is a 3-month placement in industry. Like you have to contact companies to be like, right, I'm on this master's course. Can I come with you and do a 3-month project?
Yeah.
And I was talking at the time they were Wood. They're now been bought out and they're Jacobs. I work for Jacobs now. But at the time, Wood was saying, so yeah, we're happy to have you if you get through our grad scheme. And I was like, okay, well, I'm at your assessment center already. Fantastic. And I remember getting the call, and I remember going, I've got the job. Oh yeah, I can also finish my masters. like it was a complete afterthought at that point. I was like, oh, we got any money?
That must have been such a relieving position to be in, though. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
You were sorted,
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing feeling. I remember getting the phone call, and I was still in labs at the time, and there was a couple of other guys in the labs with me who'd been on the assessment center day. And I was the first one to get the phone call from the woman being like, yeah, by the way, we'd like to offer you the job. And a couple other guys got it in my labs, but 1 or 2 didn't, which is why I kind of took the phone call and then I went inside and I was like, right, don't say anything. Just kind of keep this excitement to yourself. Otherwise, you're going to let some people down. But the amazing thing was it was like my first ever assessment center as well. So that was super lucky. Yeah, it was crazy.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, so we'll move on then. So you did the masters, you got the job.
Yeah.
What is now? I mean, this is also a very difficult question. Could you take us through a working day of Sam Kent? And I'm aware you'll probably be doing very different things each day. I just want to kind of give the listeners and the readers a sort of view of what you do.
Yeah. So it's funny, like you say that it's different each day, but the reality is it's kind of not, because what I do is I'm a graduate physicist, but I work for a consultancy. So essentially what happens is like nuclear clients will basically, people like EDF and other ones I can't say, will basically hand over data to us and go, okay, so we need to do some calculations. We need to have a look at some of this. Like I've been down to Dorchester. I've done training stuff. I've been to Barrow with like BAE and everything for other stuff. I've only been with them for a short time, and I've been bounced around so many times and like just doing loads of different stuff in the nuclear industry. But yeah, an average day for me is mostly just desk work, if I'm being honest. But it's a combination of mostly coding. So a lot of it is running like physics simulations to see if stuff is like safe and like radioactive material is actually safe and shielded, and making sure it doesn't break open.
Yeah.
But also a lot of it is like looking at documents and maybe just reviewing safety procedures and stuff and just going, okay, well, we can see you've done this, but maybe you should do that instead. it's very much like a sort of I don't know. The best way I can describe it is it's not so much technical as it is just thinking, could you do more?
Yeah. Okay.
Like there's a nice sort of level of like common sense to it as well. Like you have to think in terms of cost and like practicality. There's this thing called a LARP, which means as low as reasonably practical in the nuclear industry, which basically means that if it's a little more expensive to make something safer, like it's kind of mandatory you do that.
Yeah.
But if it costs an unreasonably large amount to get like a really small improvement, then you're not expected to do it. It's basically do something as well as you can, and then we'll have a look at it and assess it.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
But my day to day is mainly just like working these codes and assessing whether something's safe or not. Really, that is my main job.
Because one of the things I was going to come on to, talking about some of the kind of myths that surrounds nuclear energy and stuff, is that a lot of people who don't understand the nuclear energy, and I must admit, this was me before I looked into it and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I think that nuclear energy is incredibly unsafe, and must be incredibly unsafe for the workers that work around it. And I suppose a difficulty is that obviously whenever you hear about nuclear energy in the media or in films or anything like that, or any sort of art form, it's always nuclear weapons or nuclear used in really negative ways, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you know what, you're entirely right. And I actually, so about a couple of weeks ago, I participated in a like young generation network like nuclear speaking competition.
Okay.
And I came second, and my entire talk was basically talking about like what is the like how can we educate people on nuclear? How can we fight anti-nuclear propaganda? Because I was coming out of the train station a couple of weeks back, and some random dude just handed me a leaflet, and it was basically detailing like all the absolute atrocities from radiation coming through the packages going through the train station, and me being, university educated in nuclear science, I was reading this like, okay, nothing here is factually incorrect. Like they were putting everything in, which was like they were saying like, oh, it emits low level radiation, it can cause cancers, and it's kind of like taking a puzzle and like putting the pieces, like kind of forcing the pieces together. It's like, okay, that looks kind of right, but that doesn't seem like you wouldn't do it naturally.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff the nuclear industry is facing. It's facing like very targeted, very specific attacks from people now. And like I did a whole talk on the misconceptions, and you are entirely right. Like The Simpsons alone, like when I was a kid, there was green sludge, fish with 3 eyes, and a boss who could not give a flying shit about his workers' safety, and he was just money hungry. And for ages, this was my opinion of nuclear power. Like this is what a lot of people think. I mean, if you actually ask them, do you think this is what nuclear power is? A lot of people probably go, well, no, it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they don't know why it's wrong. They don't know the realities of it.
It's so funny. It's so funny. Sorry it's so funny that you bring up The Simpsons, because I asked a few people if they'd have any questions they'd like me to ask you about your thoughts on nuclear and stuff. And one of the first questions I had was, "Is it anything like The Simpsons?" Was literally one of the first questions.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's nothing like The Simpsons. Like, the thing is, this is what I love about it. Is like as a kid, you laugh at it because you think it's taking the piss out of the truth.
Yeah.
As an adult, you realise the whole thing is ironic. But if you don't have that knowledge base, you can't do the comparison. You can't have this realization. It's like when you go back to it's like when you go back to like cartoons as an adult and you go, "Oh, I find this funny still," but for an entirely different reason.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, it was just there's like huge misconceptions in the nuclear industry about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of damaging to us, the amount of people which don't trust nuclear energy.
Yeah.
But I want to put this out here right now because, like, don't get me wrong, I work in the nuclear industry. I love nuclear energy. But the reason it needs people like me and the people I work with who have incredible experience, years of codes, is because the truth is nuclear power is inherently unsafe. If you need to keep it at that exact sweet spot to be producing the energy you want. If it's too low, the thing just doesn't work. If it's too high, it has a chance to melt or worse, explode.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing is, setting up a nuclear reactor is easy. Making a safe nuclear reactor is incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of nuclear education can actually be helped by the nuclear industry basically turning around and saying, look, we understand there are problems. We understand that like there's nuclear waste. We understand there are, you know, problems with safety. People are concerned about it being near their homes. They're concerned about what if something goes wrong. Is there any real sort of contingency plan? And the best answer we can give as an industry is we can go, we're just as shit scared as you are, which is why we work 24/7 to make sure this doesn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, it is an incredibly reliable fuel source, like power source. Yeah, like you think solar and wind are really temperamental on the conditions. On a sunny day, solar power generates more energy. If you need an energy boost, you can't just turn on the wind and like increase the brightness on the sun.
Not
It
yet.
doesn't work. Not yet. No, we'll get there.
I don't know if you've ever seen Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
What we need is a solar panel hooked up to a floodlight, so it's just endless perpetual energy. That's exactly. We've solved it. But nuclear power is different. Nuclear power, you can get a call and you can go, yeah, we need more power. It's like, yeah, sure, rev up the throttle.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I can understand why a lot of people don't want it to be our main energy source, and I kind of agree with that. Like having a wide base means that, you know, if one thing goes wrong, we've still got all these other backups. But at the same time, in terms of meeting a power demand here and now, it's all well and good people saying, oh, let's just pump a ton of money into solar and wind and, you know, make it viable in like 50 years time as like total energy production. Whereas nuclear is here now and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
There are people who are willing to do it.
Because, yeah, I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask you actually is, have things, you know the HBO miniseries Chernobyl?
Yes, excellent by the way, very accurate.
Is it?
We did a whole module about it in university. There's a couple of inconsistencies, but that's mostly just old men bickering about history.
Oh,
For the most part, the science and like the actual problems and everything, like very accurate and very well made.
Interesting.
Like fun fact, so much so that the Russians have now commissioned their own version where it was an American spy who set off the reactor. That's how pissed they were at how accurate or negatively portrays like the Soviet Union.
Wow, I mean that's not surprising in the slightest.
No, it's not. Like I love how the whole thing is just like not even low key. The whole thing is like an anti-communist propaganda piece as well.
So what I was going to ask is, things like that, do they negatively affect the industry? Because they just focus on, obviously, like Chernobyl was a disaster, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of incompetency involved. There was a lot of blaming, and it didn't help that everyone in charge tried to bury the problem.
Yeah.
They really did just try and go, do you know what? Sweep it under the rug. There are RBMK reactors today, I believe, in Russia that have still not been modified to make safe.
Really?
Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. They may have done.
I'll hold you.
But the last I heard, apparently there are some where they've just kind of updated the legislation and gone, yeah, we'll just make sure that particular incident never happens again. But like the original like design flaw that made it happen, supposedly it hasn't been completely fixed entirely.
Wow.
But that's terrifying when you think about it.
Yeah.
But a great thing is because there's a scene in it. I don't know if you remember, but there's a scene in it where the scientist like opens a window and a radiation detector immediately goes off, and she scans the takes a swab of it and looks at it and it's like, okay, this is like an isotope, this is dangerous. And like it was a good like 50 miles away or something in Chernobyl, and they call around all the reactors.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. The thing is, that actually happened, but in Europe, in the UK. Birmingham's radiation detectors got set off by the isotopes that had travelled across Europe.
Wow.
That's when the Europe and the UK knew about it, because they were like, hang on a minute, we're picking up increased radiation. Has a reactor gone off somewhere in the world? And they started phoning around everywhere.
Wow, that's
that's the first we heard of it. That's when the Russians finally went, okay, yeah, sorry. Because we exactly, like a
What am I like? Oopsie daisy.
But you think how crazy that is, that here in the UK we can go, hang on a minute, we've noticed a slight change in the air. You've done a whiffy over there, haven't you?
So I suppose then, because obviously before, obviously I'll just presume that things like that would negatively affect the industry. But if you're saying that it is quite scientifically accurate, I suppose in some ways that must be quite good and quite educational for people like me who obviously doesn't understand.
But the interesting thing is it's a double-edged sword, because I know there are some people in the industry might disagree with me here, but I personally think, as long as we have not an overly huge amount, not like, looning over your shoulders, checking your homework every 10 minutes kind of regulation, but the nuclear industry absolutely needs constant self-validation of regulation. Like, that's the whole point of me being of consultancies existing for the nuclear industry. Like, it's a government requirement that anything nuclear is looked at several times. All the project work is done several times by several different companies. Like Jacobs and Rolls-Royce constantly compare each other's work.
Okay.
Like from separate studies. Because if we can basically go, right, we've both done this separately, no collaboration, and we've come to the same agreed result, we can go, okay, so our science is probably sound here. We're probably doing something correct, because that way you mitigate so many problems like management bias and people, like one problem just catapulting forward, no one else catching it. If you just have all these little checks in place, it becomes an inherently safer system. So in one sense, yes, Chernobyl has benefited because it's kind of reminding everyone of, like, this is the fuck up. I know this happened, like, what was it? Was Chernobyl in the 80s, I believe? I can't remember entirely. But however many years it was, like, it's at least over 30 years ago.
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago. That's a long enough time that people start to forget. Like, we had Fukushima relatively recently. I don't know if you remember, but Fukushima was in the news.
Yeah.
And I remember, and people were, like, the news was filled with it for weeks. Like, with people, like, constant updates on how it was going and was it handled correctly. And Fukushima was handled really well. Like, they did everything they were supposed to, and they managed to stop, like, a huge catastrophe. But the reason it happened in the first place is, again, there wasn't enough proper industry regulation, and there was a little bit of chummy palliness. So here's the story from how I heard it. Basically, in Japan, there's a huge, like, culture, a professional culture, where you never like address your boss. You never, like, say they're doing something wrong or suggest something different. If your boss says do this, you do it.
Yeah.
Like, it's very much sort of that sort of controlling sort of professional relationship. So none of the workers kind of addressed the issue when some of the higher management were quite pally with the regulators who were supposed to be checking the plant and making sure everything was fine. And they had a tsunami wall, which I believe was about 15 foot high. Regulation said it should have been, like, I don't know, 40, 30, maybe 50 feet, just a much higher height than it was. But it wasn't. It was never built. Like, again, probably just, in relationships and stuff, like, just not quite professional enough, right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So when the tsunami hit, it went completely over this flood wall, and that's what caused the accident. It's because the tsunami just hit the reactor, and originally they were supposed to have a backup power, but the problem was the backup power was in the basements of the reactor, like the generators. So when the tsunami came over, it flooded the basements and the backup power couldn't come on. And that was what started it all. And it all started with, like, regulators being just a bit too lax in what they were doing. So it's a worldwide issue. If you're going to do nuclear power, you absolutely have to hold everyone accountable for what you're doing.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, and that story completely highlights your point about how important safety is around the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
I just googled it. Chernobyl was 86.
86. I was right. Yeah, in the 80s. Yeah. Yeah, but on the other hand, any awareness of nuclear issues is good because it gets people doing their research. And as much as people want to say that nuclear power is always bad and there's always negative portrayals, when you do actually try and research it and look at the pros and cons, yes, there are problems, but it is still an incredibly useful source of power. And when done correctly, it's one of the safest, environmentally speaking. Well, if you consider greenhouse gases.
Yeah.
Obviously, because nuclear power produces zero greenhouse gases.
Yeah, I
None.
mean, one of the stats I have here is nuclear power is around, at the moment, 19% of our whole country's electricity,
Mm.
which is quite a big amount, isn't it? Really, I mean, and that's also predicted to rise to a third over the next 20 years or so.
Yeah, because we've got a bunch of other reactor plants being commissioned and built all over the country. Another interesting thing you might want to know is that the way nuclear power plants are built is they're always positioned on the coast near the ocean, because they use the seawater to cool down the coolant water in the reactor.
Okay.
It's the most reliable way to cool down the water, is just use seawater. So
Oh,
that's why they're always built in like the most remote locations.
yeah. Oh, I mean, that makes complete sense, though. That makes complete
Yeah,
sense.
This is the thing. There's so many smart and innovative and brilliant people working in nuclear power, but there's just like these one or two inherently dangerous things that stop it becoming properly mainstream.
Yeah, of
Like,
course.
honestly, I think if we got rid of even one of them, nuclear power would skyrocket in popularity. Because the two main problems are something can go wrong and release radiation, and radioactive waste. I
Yeah.
reckon if you got rid of even one of them, people would be so much more tolerant of it. But because there's both of them, and you can't really do anything about both of them, like the inherent risk will always be there, and we still don't have a solution to nuclear waste. We just basically encase it in concrete and bury it underground. That's the best we do at the minute.
I was going to say, because that takes me on quite nicely, because one of the questions that was also asked to me to ask you,
Hmm.
I've not worded this very well, but so nuclear waste buried underground and obviously it decomposes.
Mhm.
Do you think that the topic of trying to find alternative solutions to this is taken seriously enough in the industry? And do you think that the level of research that goes into these alternative ways is sufficient enough at the moment? In your personal opinion, of course.
Yeah, I'll just preface by saying I'm no expert in nuclear waste. Again, I've only been with it for a year, and a lot of it's what like glancing opinions and bits and pieces I've
Yeah,
taken from co-workers. But I've done a couple of projects where I'm looking at shielding on nuclear waste, and the main concern we have is, can we store it long term so that none of it kind of erodes and gets out, and can we store it so that there's like a massive amount of the radiation doesn't get through the shielding. That's the main thing we're looking for. We're essentially looking to find like this magic box that will hold it until it's safe. But the problem is, nuclear waste keeps being generated, so we keep having to making more of these boxes, and then we keep have to putting them like kind of together in these warehouses and spaces. And it gets to the point where you go, right, now that all of those are in there together, because if you say like 5% of the radiation comes through all these boxes, and that's safe, right? If you then suddenly put 20 of these boxes in a room, that's 20 times that 5% of radiation, which probably isn't going to be safe.
Yeah.
So at what point do you say, right, we need to find another place to stash it, and then another, and eventually it gets to the point where it's like we're running out of room. We're
Yeah.
running out of places, because they have to sit for years. Like uranium has a half-life of like thousands, if not millions of years. I can't remember exactly.
Wow, really?
But yeah, uranium is incredibly long to like to fully like decay. So these things have to sit just by themselves for thousands of years until someone comes along and goes, "Yep, that's fine. Let's put it somewhere else."
Yeah.
So there's nothing else you can do with it. Like in many ways, a lot of people just kind of went, "Yeah, there's no way to alter radioactivity. Might as well just take it as is." So yeah, it's definitely a contested issue.
Yeah.
Even in the industry, like even without people saying it's unsafe, at the end of the day, you still have to pay money to package these things, put them in a pit, like you have to costs to look after and maintain it as well once it's in there.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in my opinion, again, this is coming from someone who doesn't know the science of nuclear waste, is
Yeah.
that I think the people that kind of are willing to kind of argue the fact that it shouldn't, nuclear energy is not a good thing because all they do is store it underground and let it decompose, and it never takes years and years and years, blah 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 blah. But they don't. They have a subconscious because they're against nuclear energy. Full stop. What they don't stop to think about is that everything you ever do in your life or around the world has some sort of waste product, you know, and it just seems that there's this negative subconscious against nuclear energy, that because they know that there's not many alternative ways yet to dispose of the waste, that's what they'll lean on, if that makes sense.
See, I do agree with that. I do, like, to an extent. Like, there's a lot of interesting, like, points that can be raised here. Like, yes, like everything, like waste is everywhere. I agree with that. Like everything we do in terms of production of energy is making waste. Like we burn coal and oil all the time, and greenhouse gases keep going up. But for some reason, people are just like, oh, we've got to. What else are we going to do? We've got to. People are far more scared of radiation because it's not killing the planet; it's killing them, and that's the difference. People don't want to be affected.
That's a really good point.
They don't give a fuck if the Amazon rainforest is losing acres every day. What they care is if they're safe in their own house. And that's the kind of ignorance that you kind of need to root out of people and go, look, you either want things to be fine in 20 years or you want them to be fine now. And that's your, like, that's what you're after.
Really good point. That's a really good point.
Right? So this is why people only kick up a stink about wind farms when it's suddenly blocking the view.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an inherent selfishness. People want change. They don't want it to affect them. Right? But also, at the same time, I kind of like, because with nuclear waste is a completely different animal. Like with landfills, yeah, you can fill landfills, and yeah, it's going to be pollutants and there's going to be horrible stuff in there. But at the end of the day, life will still thrive. There will still be some sort of nature in there, won't there? Eventually, landfills will decompose and things will go back to normal.
Yeah.
The material is very different to that. There's a, I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to look it up after this because I really should know it. But it's a lake in Russia, again, the Soviet Union, the good old people they are. They had a lake where they dumped all of their radioactive material. They just threw all their radioactive waste into this lake, right? And it sunk to the bottom, and it is the single most polluted place on Earth. There is no life in this lake. None. No fish, no plants, nothing. It is dead. It is a barren piece of water, right? And they were kind of like, okay, whatever, fair enough, who cares? But a problem is, one year, there was a drought, and the lake dried up. So all that radioactive waste that was on the bottom suddenly became dust, and it blew in the wind, and a huge amount of radioactive material got spread across the country, at which point they went, oh shit, and concreted the entire lake bed, sealing it.
Wow.
That's the difference. That wouldn't happen on a landfill. A bit of rubbish blows over, everyone goes, ah, okay, fair enough, put it back. But the thing is, and nature will survive. Like, this is the thing. A lot of people are scared the world is ending with greenhouse gases. The world isn't ending. It's just not becoming suitable for humans.
Yeah.
That's the big difference. With radioactivity, you get too much radiation, it's not suitable for anything.
I suppose the thing with radioactivity as well is that because it's still quite fairly new, isn't it, really, in like science terms, like the understanding of how it works and stuff, I suppose that in itself creates a lot of fear for those that don't understand the science of it.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. We know a lot about radioactive materials and how to like use them in terms of getting what we want, but we have no idea like how to alter radiation. Like, when you look up scientific data on like what different the half-lives of different isotopes and radioactive elements is, that's a solid fixed number. Like if you have a block of uranium, you know exactly how long it will take for half of it to decay. Right? That's something we figured out over years. But a different element might completely decay in a matter of seconds, as opposed to the thousands of years this uranium takes. Now, like, people still don't know why. They know it's like a quantum phenomenon inside the nucleus, right? But no one could tell you why uranium has that half-life compared to this other one. There's probably theories out there, but there's no way to change it. It's an inherently it's just an inherent thing we take for granted. Like if you drop an apple, it's going to fall. It's just like a scientific fact that is how these behave. And that's something really scary because it's not something we can fix. It's something we have to kind of mope around and look into other stuff. Like I read a couple of papers a few years back where people have tried to alter the radioactive half-lives of elements in like really obscure and silly ways, but nothing affects it. Heat, magnetism, light, pressure, anything you can think of. It's a reaction inside the nucleus of an atom. It's just completely untouchable by current human science. So that is why radioactive waste is really dangerous, because it's not like someone can say, oh, why can't you just make it decay faster?
Yeah.
It's like saying make light go faster.
Yeah.
Fucking there's just, so once you make nuclear waste, the only way to get rid of it is to just go, right, we just got to let it sit there.
Yeah.
As opposed to landfill, where people are coming up with new ways to recycle all the time. The only thing I've seen, it was discussed in university. Haven't heard much about it since. But there's a couple of companies which are like chemically sealing radioactive waste in like glass.
Okay.
And if ever I manage to get my hands on this stuff, like, it's going to make the best paperweight in the world. But it's like old radioactive waste, which has been like, I don't know how it works exactly, but I remember there's someone giving a talk about it at university where it's been made radioactively inert by like sealing it in a glass.
Oh.
And people had these things as like paperweights on their desk at the company.
Wow. Shit.
Yeah, and see, the thing is, it feels like everything I just said got blown out of the water. But the reason I said that first is because I want people to think, well, how the fuck did they do that? Because that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Like, how have you done this?
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It's like a paperweight as well. That's funny.
It's great. It's like, it's those kind of advancements that's what the industry needs.
Yeah, I mean, it's that powerful, and then use it as a paperweight.
Yeah, it's absolute madness. Absolute madness.
Okay,
yeah.
So we've already touched upon a lot of sort of challenges that face the industry. But can you think about maybe perhaps some other challenges that might be facing the industry at the moment?
Funding.
One of the stigmas and stuff.
It's always funding and education. Those are the two biggest problems with the nuclear industry. Like obviously the dangers and the inherent dangers with the regulation and stuff, but that's already stuff the industry is hitting as hard as it can. Like constantly putting its own regulation in, constantly making things safer and engineering advancement. That's already being done. The industry is still trying to hit education as hard as it can. But the problem is, in my opinion, is that it's all sort of, I don't know, the word I use is third party, because you get your formal scientific education in school as a kid, and that's where most people's opinions of science are formed. They either go, fuck it, I don't really give a shit, or they go, this is cool, I want to know more.
Yeah.
And education in the nuclear industry would be so much easier if there was just more outreach programs. If, like, just for one science lesson, like, I don't know, maybe a year, like an industry person came in and he gave a class and he just spent an hour just completely dispersing all the myths. Like the amount of the amount of kids, I reckon, who still think that green sludge is on the wall of every nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I did.
Yeah.
I genuinely thought that was how it was. It was like green glowing goop everywhere, and it's just not true. And you just need someone to come in and say, that's not true, show them a video, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes. Especially if you make it fun and interesting. So that's something the nuclear industry is fighting, but funding is huge. And this kind of leads on to my previous point. I mentioned this in the talk I did for the Nuclear Institute. You think, you're a kid, you've grown up with these cartoons, let's say you've taken a negative opinion of the nuclear industry, right? You're not in the industry, you're not politically motivated or anything. So the nuclear industry as a whole probably doesn't care about your opinion, but they should, because you're a voter. And if you see a party with an anti-nuclear policy that you agree with, you're going to put your ballot on for them. At which point they get into power. At which point they're going to enact these anti-nuclear policies, and they're going to seriously harm the industry. Education of every single man, woman, and child in nuclear is for the prolonged benefit of the industry. Like, they really should be focusing on educating the public, because they are going to bring in pro-nuclear governments.
Yeah.
So,
really good point. It's a really good point. Again, God, you're full of it. It's like you've prepped and you have all these fantastic points.
Do you know what? It's probably all just from the talk I did a couple of weeks ago. I won a fair bit of moolah for that, so I'd like to think I know what I'm talking about.
Well, that's cool, though. Like again, that's not an angle I would have ever thought of. That how much your views on the nuclear industry and nuclear energy will affect which political stance you'll take and what will benefit the industry. It's a really good point.
It's like the whole point of why the Green Party like grew in popularity, because they basically turned around and said, save the planet. And a ton of people went, yeah, that's the one I care about the most.
Yeah.
Like, people vote for the issues they care about the most. And if your prime issue is environmentalism, then that's what the parties you're going to vote for.
Yeah.
But the thing is, again, that sort of stuff is also a huge indicator of the current mood of, like, you know, the public. Like, how few votes every year do the Green Party get?
Yeah.
Another instance of people going, not my problem.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to come to an end with this, unfortunately, because I've just realised what the time was and how long we've been talking. Do you have...
My fault as well.
No, it's fantastic. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I'd love to get you on again to continue this discussion, and I'll
yeah, I'd love to. It'd be great. Yeah.
More questions from other people and stuff, because
absolutely
start incorporating into this blog, you know. So before we finish off, then, do you have any advice for physics graduates that maybe not industry, but if they just want to join an industry in general, you know, do you have any advice for physics students?
God, well, my first one is figure out what you want to specialize in. If you're going to be a scientist, a specialization is your best friend. Of course, that you probably can sort of just get into a general physics job or whatever, in some regards. But if you specialize in something, you can target that specifically, and you are far more likely to be employed in the industry, because the more you specialize, the less people you have to compete with. That's just the plain and simple. But another really important thing is networking. And it's very difficult for people to do, because I was never taught it, and even now I'm pretty terrible at it. But get talking to your professors, get talking to your teachers. You don't have to kiss their ass. Just ask them questions, stuff you're interested in. Just, if you have a moment where you think, I'd quite like to do this, your university is going to have someone who's a specialist in that department, or at least can point you in the right direction. Go to them, say, yeah, I'd like to do this. Do you know any companies that do, internships or stuff like that? Like, I learned the hard way that getting into a scientific profession and starting a career is about putting yourself out there, and it's about proactively hunting down the thing which you think is, and you're going to have to take risks. Again, I did. But if the biggest risk you're taking is applying for a specialist internship when you're already in your degree at like 19 years old, that's not really a risk. That's you taking a chance, right? So yeah, put yourself out there, try your hardest, and start asking around. But also, and the truth at the end of the day is, you do need to get results. You do need to be making sure you're hitting your grades and actually getting that degree.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm by no means an expert in this, but that's my 2 cents.
No, but I mean, to be fair, I don't care if you're an expert or not. I just want to hear you. Genuinely though, I don't invite people on because I think they're experts. I just want
that's true. Yeah,
interesting people that I want to hear their opinions on things. You know.
No, this is great. Yeah, I've had a really fun time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Like I said, I'll definitely have to get you on again, because I've loved doing this. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sam. Take care of yourself. Take care.
Take care, mate. Tooroo.
Yeah, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.